Hey YouTubers, welcome to the program. This is a Diverging Perspective. This is your host, Patrick Penry. Okay, 18 reasons not to vote for Trump. I will make comments along the way because I'm not advising you to vote for Biden either. He was involved in the cover-up of the radioactive plume and cloud from Fukushima. I have 358 pages of documented FOIA evidence, transcripts, emails, telephone calls, these sorts of things that prove the Obama administration there was a multi-agency cover-up of the radioactive plume and cloud. They knew how bad it was going to be. No one told you to shelter in place in 2011, but now they want you to shelter in place for COVID-19, and I find that interesting and disturbing at the same time. So, 18 reasons not to vote for Trump. Many of these apply to Joe Biden as well. For instance, number one, teleprompter. Joe Biden uses the teleprompter all the time, Trump, on his initial campaign run, did not use a teleprompter. He just spoke off the cuff. People commented about that. People loved that. He said some stupid things. He said some smart things. He said a whole bunch of stuff, but it was off the cuff. He spoke his mind without a teleprompter or a written piece of paper on the podium to read from. But now I notice anytime he has a press conference or he's speaking, I don't know about his campaign speeches now. I haven't been paying much attention to them, but certainly anytime he's in front of the media, most of the time, especially related to the coronavirus, he's reading from a teleprompter or a piece of paper with a prepared statement. He's no longer just off the cuff speaking. And that's one thing people liked about him when he ran for office the first time. I don't see him doing a lot of that anymore. Number two, 4 long years, Trump's made no move to prosecute Hillary Clinton. And crime she's guilty of, from the cover-up of the nuclear plume to the Freedom of Information Act email scandal, she's undoubtedly guilty of a whole lot of things, but no one wants to go after her. And Trump actually had people chanting, "Lock her up, lock her up." If you remember, on his first run for office, I did listen to a number of his campaign speeches, and he had the crowd worked into a frenzy chanting, "Lock her up, lock her up." I was even chanting along for fun when it was playing on the radio, So now, within a week of Trump taking office, he was asked, I believe it was by CBS, interviewed him, and they asked him if he was going to go after Hillary Clinton. And Donald Trump said, and I quote, "She's good people." Quote, "She's good people." That's what he said about her. He's made no move to prosecute, investigate, or have anything to do with Hillary Clinton other than to state she's good people and then just leave it alone. Number three, 4 long years, Trump has made no move to address the possibility of ending abortion. This was one of his campaign issues when he ran 4 years ago. And I know recently he's appointing a woman to the Supreme Court who's anti-abortion or pro-life, however you want to phrase it. But my suspicions are, even with Kavanaugh and this woman in there, they're not going to try to overturn precedent. You'll see 4 years of avoidance of this subject, and 4 years where no real legitimate campaign is going to be mounted to do anything about ending abortion. You're just not going to see it. So while on his initial campaign run, that was a big thing, ending abortion, talking about pro-life, for 4 years, I have not heard his wife even talk about it. Instead, she's talking about bullying, okay? Number 4, Trump has not even tried to drain the swamp. I mean, let's be real, people. When I talk about Trump's administration, I call it an orgy of corruption. I mean, and it's riddled with these conflicts of interest. For instance, the Fauci, Gates, Moderna conflicts of interest. Moderna sending the Moncef Slaoui, their CEO guy, to head the Warp Speed Task Force. Well, Moderna does biotech, vaccines, that kind. They just got a contract, by the way, Moderna did. So, wow, what an over-the-top conflict of interest. But here's one even greater than that. Anthony Fauci and Bill Gates are longtime family friends. Their dads knew each other. They all know each other. They're on a first-name basis. They call each other all the time. Fauci is head of the coronavirus task force. Bill Gates is in pharmaceuticals, biotech, etc. His best friend is the head of the coronavirus task force. Bill Gates is standing to make a lot of money off of the coronavirus. That is, for me, the greatest conflict of interest I have ever known of in my 52 years here on Earth. 52. I'm almost 53. 52 years. I've not seen anything so over the top, blatant, in your face as the Fauci-Gates conflict of interest, and the Moderna guy going in there to the Warp Speed Task Force. That's terrible. That's terrible. Who has Trump fired that has changed the regime? When I say regime, I mean the way our country, our government has of doing business. What's its methods? How does it operate? Who has Trump fired that in 4 years has changed the regime, the way the federal government operates? In what way has the federal government changed its methods? Is our government any less corrupt than it was 4 years ago? I ask those questions because he talked a lot about draining the swamp in his initial campaign run and his speeches. Number 5, let's keep it moving. Trump turns a blind eye to the Fauci-Gates modern conflict of interest, possibly the most flagrant, over-the-top conflict of interest the world's seen. This is kind of part of the previous one, but I'm not speaking specifically to the conflict of interest. I'm speaking that Trump has seemed to not know about this or mention it. He's played like he doesn't like Fauci, even posted the hashtag Fire Fauci, but he hasn't fired Fauci. He hasn't asked him to step down, and I've never heard Trump speak about this conflict of interest. If he speaks ill of Fauci, it's about something else, face masks or something stupid like that. But either Trump is completely ignorant to the fact that Gates and Fauci are longtime family friends and this is a conflict of interest, or he knows all about it and he's intentionally avoiding that subject. Okay, number 6, let's keep it moving. Trump has failed to launch an independent, objective investigation into the Epstein assassination. Even more disturbing considering Trump was good friends with Jeffrey Epstein. And when you look into the Epstein case, when he was in the maximum security federal penitentiary, and they found his body there and said it was suicide, the Epstein family hired a coroner who was a former coroner for the New York penal system his whole career. That's all he did was look at bodies from people that died in the penal system in New York. He said he looked at every single person who had ever hung themselves, every single one, and they had never broken the 3 bones that he said were broken in Jeffrey Epstein's neck. Thus, he had concluded it was likely not a suicide, but a homicide. And now the fact that Trump, have you ever heard Trump talk about that? Has he launched an investigation into that? Don't you think that's really serious? Because Epstein was flying these super powerful, well-known, influential athletes, entertainers, political figures, wealthy elite to Epstein's island to have sex with underage kids. Isn't that important? And Trump seems to have just forgotten all about it, doesn't know anything about it. All right, let's keep it moving. Number 7. Trump does not care about the assassination of Jamal Khashoggi, Washington Post reporter and American citizen. Like the Epstein case, no real legitimate objective investigation. It appears that Trump does not care about Americans being assassinated if it's by the oil-rich nation of Saudi Arabia. And if you remember back, the CIA finally told the truth for once and said that it likely was initiated by the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, the assassination of Jamal Khashoggi. Remember, he was about to get married the next day or something, goes into the embassy, never comes out alive again, right? That's not important to Trump. The guy, look, so he comes from Saudi Arabia. He's a freaking American citizen, man. And if that doesn't afford you some level of protection or some kind of attempt for justice, that's a sad day, a sad day. So Trump didn't seem to care about that at all. And that guy was a journalist. To me, that's super important. As a journalist myself, that's super important that we protect people who are telling the friggin' truth. All right, let's keep it moving. Number 8. Trump said COVID, quote unquote, came out of nowhere. And they've been hitting that up for a long time, that how could they have known? It just came out of nowhere. I'm going to link to an article in this video I want you to read. I have 20 years of them running pandemic simulations, your government, the wealthy elite, the DOD, John Hopkins, World Bank, all these, Bill Gates, Melinda Gates, all these guys have been running simulations for 20 years. I documented it very carefully. So Trump said COVID came out of nowhere, but Dr. Anthony Fauci, during the Obama era, sent $3.7 million to the Wuhan lab in China, the level 4, their only level 4 biolab in China for coronavirus research. Trump has failed to mention this, failed to mention 20 years of pandemic simulations. Let me name a few: Cladex, Crimson Contagion, Event 201, Atlantic Storm, Dark Winter, Triton 2. There are more. And he's failed to open a discussion about the need to close, at the least, the world's level 4 biolabs, if not any and all labs doing this type of research, and I use that in quotations, into dangerous diseases and or the bioengineering and modification of viruses for military applications. And I ask you, my fellow Americans, They say these biolabs are to study these diseases so we can better protect ourselves from them. And I'm looking around at the world right now and I'm asking you, how's that working for you? How's that working for you? We let these maniacs run these bioweapons labs. You know, it's a matter of sooner or later, not if, but when one escapes, if not being intentionally released for profit. Because there are some who are going to make fantastic profits, such as Pfizer with their $1.96 billion payout, right? And right off the bat, Johnson & Johnson, who is at Event 201, I just listed that as one of these pandemic simulations. That was a coronavirus pandemic simulation in October of 2019, just before the virus was released. Johnson & Johnson had a representative at that simulation, and they immediately got a payout with a $456 million government-funded thing to create a vaccine. So I find it convenient. Trump doesn't seem to know about all these simulations and doesn't speak about it. All right, number 9, let's keep it moving. Trump has done nothing about the nation's tent cities and homeless crisis and won't speak to the fact nor take action. Again, folks, let me cut in right here. A lot of these that I'm telling you apply to Joe Biden or anyone running for office as president. Do you expect Joe Biden to talk about the truth about Dr. Fauci and his connection to Bill Gates? Do you expect Biden to hammer Trump on 20 years of pandemic simulations that Trump doesn't seem to know about? Certainly not. So this list, I'm not trying to pick on Trump. Most of these apply to anyone running for office as president because a lot of these are crisis subjects that are intentionally being avoided. A lot of Americans don't even know we got hit with a nuclear plume from Fukushima because they suppressed it. There was a blackout on it. So I find it really disturbing, and it applies to all candidates for the most part. If you look at some of these I picked specifically on like his teleprompter or his locker up and that kind of thing, but the core of this particular group of 18 are really serious subjects that are being avoided by anyone who runs for president. You cannot run for president of the United States and these be your talking points, what you want to address and what you want to do. You simply, someone is not allowing them to do that. Okay, so Trump has not talked about the tent cities and homeless crisis. I mean, it's terrible. And they're defecating on the street and living in cardboard boxes. I mean, holy shit, folks, it's terrible. Have you heard him talk about it? Has he done anything to divert funds or send the National Guard or build homes or do anything? Not so ever. And interesting enough, he's not taken action on the revelation that when COVID keeps kids from going to school and they lock these schools down, kids don't eat. Kids go hungry because here in Alachua County, Florida, 1 in 4 kids, the billboard sign says 1 in 4 kids are hungry. Well, I put it to you, those got to be the ones that have to get their food at school. If they don't go to school, they don't eat a lot of the time. And Trump administration has not addressed. These are important social issues that strike to the core of what America is. Are we the kind of people that help those who are down on their luck? Or are we kind of people that turn our back and don't give a damn about them? That's what I want to know. Let's keep it moving. Number 10. Starting to get fired up. Trump has not addressed, this is mine here, number 10. Trump has not addressed Fukushima in 4 years or even mentioned it. And folks, let me cut in right here and say this. I've watched a lot of politicians run for the president's office of the president. I've watched a lot of politicians have town hall meetings and enter into debates. And what they tell you when they talk about our energy policy, they state that nuclear power is a clean and emission-free form of energy that does not cause climate change. That's what they say, clean and emission-free. Now, I'll tell you one emission that comes out of a nuclear power plant, the spent fuel rods. That's not an emission. They can't find where to put those. They won't put them under Yucca Mountain. Our spent fuel pools are backed up in this country if you look into it. And the Obama administration, might I add, that ran a review of the domestic nuclear fleet post-Fukushima was informed of the fact that we have, quote unquote, many non-seismically spent fuel pools right here in the United States, end quote. That's from the FOIA documents in the NRC's own words. That's what they told Obama. So in 4 years, Trump has not mentioned Fukushima at all. He doesn't seem to know anything about Fukushima or the dire consequences of having this fleet of nuclear reactors here in this country. If nothing else, they're a sitting duck terrorist target. You could fly a plane into one. I've read documents where they're concerned about it. They don't want to talk about that publicly, the NRC, but they talk about it privately. You could fly a plane into a spent fuel pool, Indian Point near New York, and wow, It would be nasty, folks. No one wants to talk about this. No one wants to talk about the cancers that are undoubtedly a result from Fukushima. Look, if you study Chernobyl, and in my book I show you where the NRC, they know all about Chernobyl and that over a million people died from cancer from Chernobyl. They know that. They admit that privately. Knowing that, do you not think that post-Fukushima, which was many times worse, I know what the propaganda's been, and you went to the government site and the government scientists said it was 1/10 of Chernobyl, but that was a lie. If you read my documentation, your government's own words, it was many, many times worse than Fukushima. Number 3 had MOX fuel, mixed oxide. It had plutonium in the freaking fuel. So it was much worse. And we got hit hard. All our nuclear reactors here in the States detected fallout from Fukushima. So undoubtedly, some people must have died from cancer from Fukushima. While Trump says one death of COVID is too many, did they tell you to shelter in place post-Fukushima? Did they tell you not to eat green leafy vegetables? Did they tell you to stay out of the rain and not to collect rainwater? No. They left your kids out in the rain in the playgrounds. They let your kids stay outside. They did not tell you to shelter in place. But now COVID, when it's convenient to crash the economy and destroy small business, all of a sudden everyone has to stay home. Okay, and I'm just saying I find that to be interesting. So the fact Trump won't cover nuclear power or Fukushima and the real story about it, I can't vote for. I just can't vote for someone that's not going to. I mean, kids are dying from cancer related to nuclear power. That is a fact. And no politician or presidential candidate dare speak about that at all. It's almost as if they know if they speak about it, something bad's going to happen to them. Okay, let's keep it moving. Number 11. Trump has not addressed the 5,000, over 5,000 actually, DOD/Pentagon child porn viewers that got busted. I believe it was back in, I have to look it back up, 2005, something like that. 39 with top secret clearances. All but 2 still have their jobs and were never held accountable for their actions. To me, people say, well, that's back in 2005. They never lost their jobs. You not understand? That is de facto supporting child pornography in the defense sector. That is, you're essentially giving your blessing. They still have their jobs. Look, I document this on my blog. You can go and read the Operation Flicker, where they've traced all these child porn viewers back to the DOD and Pentagon. There are thousands of them. Not 5, not 50, not 500, 5,000. I mean, that to me is like, stop everything. Everything stops there. I never got past that issue. I haven't moved on past that. Has everyone else moved on past? I haven't moved on past it. Until I see someone going to arrest 5,000 motherfuckers all at once, I'll know nothing's really been done about it. And by the way, they paid for it with your tax dollars. You Christians out there, I'm telling you right now, you keep paying taxes, you're paying for their child porn. Well, what else can I conclude when they don't go? You know, 39 had top secret clearances, right? 39 of these child porn viewers had top secret clearances. I probably can't get on an airplane because I've written enough articles about the government. And these guys had top secret frickin' clearances, viewing child porn, paying for it with your tax dollars. And folks, let's talk about this culture real quick in the Pentagon DOD. I mean, if that's accepted in there, that the guy next to you is watching child porn on the computer, and you don't quit? In the Pentagon, did not everyone else say, look, if you're not going to arrest these, I'm not working alongside these guys. Are you going to arrest them? You're not? You would think there'd be a huge group of people in the DOD and Pentagon that said, look, we're tendering our resignations, we quit, we want a press conference too because this ain't right, we're losing our jobs here because you want to arrest these child porn pedos watching child porn in the Pentagon computers. So what does that say about the rest of the Pentagon? Okay, so you weren't watching child porn at the computer and you didn't get busted, but you don't seem to care? I mean, if I'm working at the Pentagon and that happens, I quit. I give my resignation and I say, by the way, I want to talk to someone in the press. This is sick. This is sick. So the fact that Obama wouldn't do anything about it, Trump won't do anything about it, and I'm going to make a guess, whoever the next president is ain't going to cover it either. And if they didn't go to jail, if they didn't lose their jobs, why would they stop doing it? That's all I'm saying. I'll keep it moving. Number 12. Now, 18 of these, we're getting near the end. Number 12. Trump says he wants to stop the flow of drugs to our country. I listened to his press conference. It was bizarre because it was a COVID-19 press conference. We started talking about the flow of drugs and bad actors. Like, what the hell's going on? What's he talking about? But he won't mention the $500 billion to $1 trillion of drug money laundered in the U.S. each year. And this is a study done, I think, by Levin back in the day. I was reading Michael Ruppert's book, Crossing the Rubicon, the other day, where he covers this in great detail. The fact that this is, 15, 20 years ago, they were laundering 500 billion to 1 trillion of drug money in the U.S. each year. Okay, he's not going to address the nation's heroin problem. I haven't heard Trump really talk about that, which has grown to epic proportions since the U.S. invaded Afghanistan. I don't know if you guys noticed, but 9/11 gave them the impetus to go seize all the oil in Iraq and secure the lithium mines and the poppy fields in Afghanistan. And isn't it coincidental that not long after that, a bunch of our soldiers, first of all, they get hooked on the pills, and then when they restrict the pills and they crack down on the pill guys, all of a sudden now they have to buy the black tar heroin. Where does that come from? Afghanistan. Who secured the fields? Our soldiers did. Ironic, isn't it? And I've not heard Obama talk about this, or Trump, or anyone. They don't want to talk about our heroin problem post-invasion of Afghanistan. We never left that country. We're still there. And my suspicions are, to be quite frank, is they're smuggling it as fast as they can from there to here. All governments smuggle drugs. All governments smuggle drugs and produce black money off the book. That's what they do. They're in it for the money, folks. And I find it disturbing Trump won't cover the real story about all the money being laundered here from drugs in this country, and the fact we went to Afghanistan to secure the poppy fields to bring black tar heroin not just to China, but back to the U.S., okay? It's almost as if they planned it. Let's keep it moving. Number 13, Trump won't speak about peak oil and the 20 years of geoengineering a warmer climate. That's what all the white lines in the sky are. That's what the misty veil that blocks out the sun. That is to hasten the melting of the polar caps. It has a precedent called Polex. If you look into it, there's a book by Lowell Ponte called The Cooling, Lowellponte, a must-read book if you want to understand what they've been doing to try to hasten the melting of the polar caps and access the 13 to 15% of the globe's oil, which is still trapped under ice, they say. And there's gold and natural gas and shipping lanes and a lot of reasons why they're doing this. But Trump, like Obama, like Bush, will not be upfront with the American public about what this is. 20 years of them spraying stuff over our head like we're cockroaches. And you know, they can't talk about it because that would be an admission that they're the reason, or that part of the reason, that the water's going to rise, and this is going to inundate coastal areas. Cities will be flooded. Beach home front property will be flooded. This is a major ecological environmental disaster that's coming. They know about this, but they want that oil because they want to profit that little bit more. It's all about greed, folks. It's all about greed. And we are transitioning right now from oil to renewable and electrical. And if you've ever studied monopolies, folks, you know that the petrochemical monopoly, the most powerful, well-financed monopoly the world's ever seen, does not just decide one day to do the right thing and say, you know what, let them go to renewables, let them have their solar power, let the Bezos start making electric vehicles, and let them switch to electric cars, and let them have lithium-powered chainsaws and that kind. Folks, you have to understand we're transitioning away from oil to renewable and electrical because they bled out oil until it was no longer profitable to do so. Then they introduce a virus, and now the world's changed. You're going to watch this transition happen before your very eyes. And Trump will not speak about that. No one will. Again, the litigation that would arise once people found out. You know, a farmer could sue because you had blocked his sunlight and his crops didn't produce the yield he's used to producing. You know, so they can't be upfront honest about it. Just like 9/11, they can't come to you and say, look, we got to go invade Iraq for oil. We can't do that. So we have to come up with a cover story and a bullshit lie, and people fall for it. So I don't fall for it. And if Trump won't speak about peak oil, look into peak oil. Read Michael Ruppert's book, Crossing the Rubicon. You got to read it. Okay, moving right along. Trump has not held the Pentagon responsible for the trillions, that's with a T, of dollars unaccounted for. There's a website, I believe, called crooksandliars.com. And if you go there and you Google the missing trillions in Pentagon, they have an excellent article there. Back when that article hit the net, they were claiming that $8.9 trillion the Pentagon couldn't account for. Well, I cycled back to 9/11 when the plane hit the Pentagon and destroyed the computers and killed people, coincidentally. They were actually looking into the Pentagon's missing $2.3 trillion. At that time, 2001, Donald Rumsfeld and the Pentagon was scrambling around trying to find a missing, unaccounted for, clerical book error, $2.3 trillion. They couldn't find it. They couldn't explain it. And so then Crooks and Liars came out a few years later and said, look, now there's 8.9 trillion missing over here. So I'm adding these together. And there was another, I haven't looked into the third audit, But what I've heard is another audit is claiming up to 30 trillion are unaccounted for. And I've seen documents on this. The Pentagon does what's called a plug. When the books don't add up, they can't account for the money, money's disappeared, stuff doesn't add up, they put in what's called a plug. And that plug fills in whatever amount to make it right and make the books even up, because they can't just stop everything, halt everything until we figure out where the money went. We have to keep purchasing and paying salaries, et cetera, et cetera. So it could be as high as 30 trillion. Now, I don't know. And there's no commission looking into this, not that it wouldn't be a corrupt and completely controlled investigation anyway, but no one's speaking of this or looking into this, the Pentagon missing this much. And I was thinking earlier, if you look at what they're going to say that COVID's going to cost us 16 trillion now, add that 16 trillion to the 16 trillion we're already in debt, because I know we don't have 16 trillion to blow on COVID. So now we're 32 trillion in debt with the Federal Reserve, plus the Pentagon's missing maybe up as much as 30 trillion. I'm looking at people and saying, look, I got a bunch of reasons not to vote at all anymore. It's a waste of time. Don't you see? It's a machine. It's a system, and you have to change the whole system. Okay, keep it moving. Number 15, we're getting close to the end. Appreciate you guys joining me for this video, because a lot of these apply to anyone running for office. No one wants to cover these subjects. Number 15. Trump has done nothing about the Federal Reserve and or producing a currency that has intrinsic value. And that is to say, if I hold a dollar bill in my hand, ultimately, as Billy Butcher would say, when shit goes sideways, that rectangular piece of, it's more cloth than paper, I understand, that rectangular piece of cloth with green print and some dead corrupt president's or dead corrupt politician's picture on it, it's worth what? You could throw it on a fire to produce heat. You could stuff it in your jacket as insulation or your mattress. It has no real value. It would just be a rectangular piece of cloth or paper, that currency. And it's talking about what, going to some kind of plastic coin or something now or something. Wow. So if you hold a gold coin in your hand, no matter how small, they say, well, there's not a lot of gold. There's a lot of people. Make small coins, silver and gold, and that has value. Even if the system crashes, that unit still has value. And I'm not an expert in currency, nor am I an expert in economics, but I can tell you what you need to do. There's a book called The Creature from Jekyll Island, and it's a lecture on the Federal Reserve. I got a little quote from a little run-up on the book. It says, G. Edward Griffin, that's the author, exposes the most blatant scam of all history, the cause of wars, boom-bust cycles, inflation, depression, prosperity. It is a lecture on the Federal Reserve, folks. So Trump and Bush and Obama and none of these guys want to address this giant pink elephant in the room, the Federal Reserve. Keep it moving. Number 16. Trump said he'd be tough on China, but the trade deficit is no better in 4 years. In fact, we're buying PPE, personal protection, from China now. We're buying PPE from China now. Now, Trump constantly calls it the China virus, but he has not really held China accountable for COVID-19. If it is truly the China virus and they're to blame for it, and there's international court, there's in a number of ways. What I understand is India is suing China over the COVID-19. So he said he's going to be tough on China, but I cannot really point you to any deal or thing he's done that has dropped that deficit down or started us manufacturing more things here in the U.S. other than, you might say, breather masks and ventilators and stuff like that, and now pharmaceutical vaccines, et cetera, et cetera. So I don't think he's any tougher on China. I can't point to, I have my own theory that all these guys actually work for China. I mean, because once you get away from the accountability of who is funding politicians, when the Supreme Court says, look, they don't have to say where their money comes from or how much money they got. Well, how do I know China didn't give Obama $5 billion to run? Or China didn't give Trump $10 billion to run for office? I don't know. I don't know who they work for. All I can tell you is they don't work for the poor people. That I know, and I know that historically over the years, the rich stay rich and the poor stay poor. That's a fact. That is a fact. And middle class pay for everything. All right, let's keep it moving. He's not tough on China. None of them are. None of them are, because China has so much money, and money talks, money speaks. Okay, number 17. Like all presidents before him, hey, we're right near the end. I'm glad you stuck around for this, because 18's a big one. 18's a big one. Like all presidents before him, Trump refuses to bring the topic of overpopulation into the discourse. Hey, I like to tell my story when I was a kid before they started spraying chemtrails. It was really beautiful here in Florida. You could go to the springs on the Santa Fe River, or you could go to the beach. Crescent Beach is where we would go to on the East Coast, just south of St. Augustine. Beautiful. And you could go south of Crescent Beach where there is the Matanzas Inlet, and there's an old Spanish fort there, and there's a bridge, the Matanzas Bridge, and the Intercoastal Waterway comes in from there. And you used to be able to pull off on the side of the road, walk down this tiny little trail, and come out this beautiful sandy beach on the Intercoastal Waterway side. And it was really private. And you could sit there all day and no one would show up. A boat might go by every couple hours. That was it. Now there's a huge paved parking lot, bathrooms there. When you go down the boardwalk, it is just packed. I mean, there's jet skis, barbecue grills, umbrella set up. People, you have to go down around the point. When you get to the point to go around the point, there's people there too. It's same at the Springs. I go to Jenny Springs here, jam-packed with people. They can't build roads and homes fast enough. They're talking about affordable housing here in Florida. We bring in, what is it, 1,000 people a day move to Florida? So no one wants to cover, and overpopulation is really about carrying capacity. It's an anthropological term. How many people and activity, and how much activity and population can your land support before there's environmental degradation or degradation to your population and or the environment? And once you have too many people, think of it as a lifeboat. You have so much food. If you bring more people in the lifeboat, you got to divvy that food up. That's called the idea of the limited good. There's only so many trees and so much oil and so much water we can process and accumulate per year. So you have to look at carrying capacity and the idea of the limited good. There's only so much to go around each year to people. And if you keep your population within those constraints, you can have a great, rewarding, fulfilling life with everything you need. But if you overpopulate, we're all fighting for resources amongst ourselves, and it does create the chaotic environment the wealthy elite love so much, because that chaos brings profit to them. So no one dares, and Biden won't talk about it either. Biden won't talk about it. In fact, no, it is a kiss of death for any politician to speak about overpopulation. Do I know of a solution to overpopulation? How we're going to get our numbers within a reasonable number of people? No, I don't have a magic thing on that one yet, but we have to discuss this, debate this, research, and look into it, folks. And we can't, it's not even in the topic of conversation. That's sad to me, because that means a lowered quality of living for kids to come down the road. They're not going to have, we're using it up. Like I say, oil's a great example. We're on the downside of peak oil, whether you want to believe it or not, folks, and we're transitioning to renewable and electric. Now is the proof. And so this transition is going to cause your kids to have a lowered quality of living for some time until they can get the numbers down and transition completely to renewables. They should have done it in the 70s when Jimmy Carter said, but they wanted to make every dollar they could. All right, no one talked about overpopulation. Off the topic of conversation. Here we are, number 18. This one also is very, very important to me. Trump, nor Biden, nor anyone wants to talk about censorship of alternative narratives in regards to the COVID-19 pandemic. Any information that has a diverging perspective is being labeled as disinformation and is censored. Facebook and Twitter accounts, YouTube channels, they're being shut down. Why has President Trump not addressed this problem? And folks, I'm not talking about what the controlled opposition media wants to make the point of this subject. They want to say that political ads and political stuff is being pulled down related to the election and the campaigns. I am not talking about that, and they know that's not what we're angry about out here in TV land, folks. We're angry because look, I've got an article where a Nobel Prize winning scientist says he believes a virus was modified. It was created in a lab. Why is that labeled as disinformation and pulled down? Why are people's accounts being pulled down? Look, I should be able to initiate freedom of speech. I should be able to initiate a discussion at the very least about the possibility that the virus could have either A, escaped unintentionally from the lab by accident, right? Or B, that it was intentionally released. I hate to say that people would do that, but if you look at what humans are capable of, yes, they certainly are capable. This possibility does exist. Now, if you begin to talk about this or write articles or post articles of other people or videos, they're being blatantly censored as disinformation and removed. In other words, they're controlling, again, just like in Fukushima, they're controlling the narrative. They're controlling the information. They're suppressing information. Alternative narratives, diverging perspectives are not allowed to be put forth. It's really that simple. And this is so dangerous now because we're almost living in China now, aren't we? It's not that much further away that a van will pull up one day and they'll just grab me out of my house and take me off for running my mouth too much, you know? So we're trying to avoid that. People, when Trump lets Khashoggi get assassinated, an American journalist, and doesn't do anything about it. And when Trump sits there and lets all these public media, so-called public media, they're really state-run. They're really run by the wealthy elite in the government. But they try to sell it to you as a public platform. When he does not speak to the fact that we're being censored, I'm not telling you to drink Listerine or bleach to kill the virus. That's not what I'm saying. I'm not even telling you to take vitamin C. I'm looking into the fact that Fauci, under Obama, sent 3.7 to the level 4 Wuhan lab, which just happens to be just down the street from the fish market where they say this stuff came from. So when you begin to look at what's not being talked about, it paints a very serious picture that we need to be having this discussion in this country, and they set the topic of discussion via their controlled mainstream media, their controlled alternative media, their controlled opposition agents who own Facebook and own YouTube. They set the topic of conversation, and it's not going to be this blatant Chinese-style censorship of people who want to express the possibility, at least, that this whole thing may be an engineered pandemic. And at this point, that is my opinion, and I do have means, motive, opportunity. I've got all that. I can show you all that stuff. And folks, this is very serious, because if you cannot catch them and stop them, what's to say they're not going to release another virus down the road again because they're making so much money? Now jobs depend on viruses to appear every few years because so many people are trying to protect us from them. It's a protection racket is what I'm concerned this is going to become. Okay, folks, I don't know how long this is going on. Let me check the recorder here and let's see where we're at. 30, it's not bad. 36 minutes. I figured it'd take longer than that, but I didn't ramble on too much. And I gave you some good information. A couple books you need to read. Crossing the Rubicon by Michael C.Ruppert covers the whole peak oil thing and 9/11. You'll really learn a lot there. Things you didn't know, you didn't hear on TV. And he carefully documents all his assertions, just as I always have. If I talk about the melting of the polar caps via the spraying from planes, I read a book that talks about Polex, and some of the ideas put forth by the Russian and Americans back during Polex were to use planes to spray stuff on the ice and melt ice, right? So we know they wanted to do it. We read about some of their ideas to do it, and then I put that forth and I say, look, and you need to read this book, because it's really a book about the history of your governments of the world trying to modify and control the weather. Okay, so that's where I come up with some of this stuff. I don't just shoot off the hip loosely. I have to have had some bona fide information. And folks, I know about propaganda and disinformation. I sift through the books that are propaganda. I pick through them. It's not an easy job. It is not an easy job. And I want to finish with this. Again, I've arrived at some conclusions recently, and I've made some predictions. I want to reiterate and restate those again. Trump will be reinstalled by one means or another. He is going to get a second term. He is going to do his best to sell vaccines for Bill Gates and Anthony Fauci to the anti-vaxxers, those Republican conservatives who are really the only ones who are the anti-vaxxers and distrustful of vaccines, are really much the conservatives. The liberals, they'll take their vaccines, they will, and that's why they didn't want Hillary in, and they wanted Trump in. So Trump will be reinstalled. He will sell vaccines, and he is, at some point will call a press conference or will be interviewed on 60 Minutes or Fox News, and he will say he was wrong about climate change. It is not a hoax, and they were going to have to take swift and appropriate action on climate change. And they have to blame climate change on us, as I've already explained to you, because the rise of that seawater would create quite a bit of litigation if you knew that part of it was intentional warming of the polar caps. All right, folks, I hope you got something out of this list of 18 reasons not to vote for Trump, but by God, most of them apply to Biden as well. And Biden hid the nuclear plume, causing a lot of cancers over here from Fukushima. So you can't vote for Biden either. And recently I've come to the conclusion that I don't see myself voting again anytime soon, because it's just crappy candidate A versus crappy candidate B. And this two-party duopoly, the Democrats and Republicans, this two-party system, all it does is breed hate and disunity. I've seen such hatred this time around. I mean, there's no one's trying to unify anything. All it does is divide the country into. Let me finish with this, folks. Here's the thing I was thinking the other day. When I looked at all the hate and division in this election cycle between the Democrats and Republicans in the two-party system, I thought to myself, because I went on Facebook, I said, God, these people's hate, they're hate. I even called people assholes because I said, look, you're worried about these two, and they won't talk about Fukushima or cancer and kids with leukemia, and I called everyone an asshole. So it even brought out the hate in me, which I apologize. I do apologize for that. But I thought to myself, it creates such division and hatred amongst Americans that I have a solution. If we take our country and we divide it into 3 relatively equal parts, and once 33 1/3% of the country, the Democrats and liberals can move there. That's your place. One section of 33 1/3%, the Republicans, conservatives can move there, and that's your place. And the last 33 1/3%, the rest of us who are not insane, we can move there and live our lives out in peace. Okay? How's that for you? All right. Thanks for joining me. It's Patrick Penry. Stay safe, stay healthy. God bless you guys. Love you. Over and out.